In 1, 2, 3, 4D Clif here, back for another exciting One Piece video. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get into this. So for today's video, I actually want to go over something that happened in chapter 1126, specifically the end of the chapter, right? We don't really need to focus on the situation that happened with Shanks and Bartolomeu. We also don't need to really focus or care about anything that happened on, Beehive Islands like that, with the Blackbeard Pirates and all that. We don't really need to focus on any of that, right? We only need to really worry about the very end of the chapter itself, right? So what really am I discussing here, right? What exactly is so important at the end of the chapter that I feel like I want to make a video about it, okay? Well, this is basically where we're sort of kicking off the actual Elbaph arc, right? Now, yes, in terms of the Elbaph arc itself, that actually comes just a little bit later down the line, right? Not much later, only about like 4 or 5 chapters ahead of time. But really, I guess in a way you can consider it, this would basically be the icing on the cake, right? The Elbaph arc itself would basically be the cake, while the situation that Nami, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and all of them, and currently, is more or less the icing on the cake itself, right? Like, this is basically the icing, and the Elbaph arc is the cake, right? I don't know if, to be honest, I don't know if there's a better way to explain that, or if there's a better metaphor to put that in, but you know what? I feel like it gets my reason across, okay? So, this is basically what I want to discuss here, right? So, at the very end of the chapter, 1126, right, Nami wakes up, right? Now, it's not the fact that I want to talk about Nami waking up, it's basically what she's hearing, right? Or basically what we're led to hear, right? So, if you remember, right, to better explain what we need to understand here, we need to actually go back a little further, right? So, as we are all aware of, the Straw Hats have just left Egghead Island, right? They left Egghead Island after the whole situation with the Elders and all that, and trying to save Vegapunk. In a way, they failed, but they also did not fail. It's kind of a hard story to put in place, right? And as you're aware of, they were on their way to Elbaph, right? With the Giants, okay? However, something ended up happening, right? And technically we know what happened, right? They ended up going into some kind of area, some kind of like mist area that actually causes you to fall asleep or something like that. It's really hard to understand, right? We'll have to wait to really understand the whole geographical area of Elbaph and all this kind of stuff to really get an idea of, okay? And as we are aware of, Luffy and the other Straw Hats themselves, Luffy, Nami, Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, and Chopper, who were all on Sunny, ended up being taken by Rhodes' giant crowbird, okay? Now, a little bit. So, to put it simply, right? As they were on their way, we all know that after each and every time that there is a big fight or there's a big, there's always like a party celebration, right? And there was plenty of situations where Nami and some of the other Straw Hats were drinking, okay? And they might have gotten a little bit too much of this green fairy tonic thing, right? Which is said to cause hallucinations, right? So Nami was definitely drunk and passed out. And this is basically what I want to discuss here, right? And I've actually seen a lot of people who mention like some really crazy ideas, but also some pretty interesting ideas to better go over and explain who exactly was that, right? So in chapter 126, right, as we are introduced to Nami, and she's basically put into like this Lego themed castle with a whole new wardrobe and everything, Nami basically wakes up. But right before she wakes up, we hear a voice, right? And this voice is basically telling Nami, wake up, saying, Nami, wake up! Wake up, Nami! Wake up! In a more maybe more like a rude or obnoxious kind of way. So it's really hard to determine who exactly this was, right? Now, let's go over the most likely candidates, right? So obviously you have the Straw Hats themselves, right? Now, we can most likely completely eliminate characters like Jinbei, Frankie, Robin, and Brook because they were still with the Giants, right? So we can definitely eliminate them, alright? So that just leaves characters like Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, Zoro, Chopper, alright? That just leaves them. Now, the real question is, who exactly was that, alright? Let's try and go over a few options here, okay? First off, let's start off with Zeus, right? Now, and most likely, whenever this thing gets animated in the anime itself, there are most likely going to be 2 options, right? So, going by the anime logic, I can probably imagine the anime will probably just have Zeus say it, right? We'll just have Zeus be the one speaking, right? I'm sure Zeus doesn't actually need to actually be in cloud form to actually speak to Nami, right? I'm sure he's very capable of actually speaking through the climate act, even if we can't see it, right? So I suppose that could be possible. And then the other scenario that the anime could actually do is actually completely skip over the voice itself, right? And that they're probably just going to pick it up with Nami waking up. Whatever they do, I'm not really sure. Alright, but I suppose those are both 2 possibilities. Now, to be very clear here, we need to discuss about this in the manga itself, right? Not specifically what the anime is going to do, but you never know. It could be very interesting how the idea works, all right? So, in chapter 126, as Nami's waking up, she hears a voice, right? Well, as far as we're aware of, we're led to believe that she's hearing a voice, right? I mean, she was heavily sedated and drugged and things like that. Oh, it is important to mention here that the only reason that Nami was actually more sedated and everything because Road actually put her to sleep, right? Like she did fall asleep as they were sailing through Elbaph and everything, and they ended up getting to like the sleepy mist sea area. However, Road, upon capturing some of the tribes, ended up putting them to sleep even more, causing a little bit more chaos. Right. All right. Now, here's the interesting thing when it comes to Zeus, right? Zeus, in terms of speech patterns, and while I'm not the best Japanese expert in everything, I have like made sure to get the best idea of every theory I've actually came across on this, right? So here's the thing when it comes to Zeus, right? A lot of people basically have pointed out here that they don't think Zeus is actually the one basically saying this is because his speech pattern of how he normally talks with Nami is very different than this speech pattern right here. Very, very different. It's not the same, right? And the other factor here is that it's basically stated that Zeus had just woken up, right? When the whole situation where Nami was being attacked by the bees, she summoned Zeus to give her a hand, right? And Zeus basically asked Nami, hey, where are we at? Good morning, stuff like that, okay? Which could lead to an indicating possibility that that voice was not Zeus, right? I do apologize for that noise you're probably hearing. That's most likely our fridge and everything. It does that noise sometimes, so I do apologize for that. All right. Now, to continue on with other shards, right? Let's go over Usopp next, right? Now, Usopp, when we first meet Usopp, he's actually in the middle of having, well, technically he's in the middle of having dinner, right? And by dinner, I don't mean he's in the middle of eating himself, all right? No. I mean, he's literally dinner for a cat, all right? A giant cat, all right? Because he's literally in the mouth of a giant, well, technically it's a lion, but the lion is also a cat. It's complicated, okay? It's very, very complicated, all right? And we know for a fact that it most likely could not be Usopp himself, right? Because it was actually confirmed by Usopp when he actually stated that he had just woken up when all of a sudden that lion thing had him in his mouth, right? Had Usopp in the lion's mouth, right? So we can probably guarantee that it wasn't Usopp. And even if it was, and while Usopp does have sometimes that speech pattern thing, but when Usopp is in a predicament like that, where he's actually almost being eaten alive by a wild animal, well, specifically a big major one, he's going to be a little freaked out. So his speech patterns probably won't be as simple as like a rude or obnoxious, wake up, Nami. It'll probably be a little bit more, wake up, Nami. It'd probably be something more like that, right? So we can most likely eliminate Usopp, right? The next one we can look at is Sanji, right? Let's look at Sanji next, okay? Now, in terms of it, we can probably guarantee it's not Sanji, right? Because Sanji would never, ever speak to Nami like that. He would never say, wake up, Nami, right? Nami, wake up. He would never say it in such a rude way, alright? Like, if you don't know Sanji, then you've never read One Piece, right? And if you never read One Piece, then you obviously don't know Sanji, right? Sanji's whole deal with women is literally a part of his core character, right? And Sanji is really more of a less a ladies' man, alright? He's always the kind of straw hat who basically refuses and doesn't want to fight with women like that. He always is part of his character, right? And he's always sweet talking and like putting on the romance and love moves and stuff like that, trying to woo the attention of the ladies themselves, right? And which also leads to him getting either nosebleeds and everything, or getting pummeled by Nami and stuff like that whenever he does some ridiculous things. Okay, so we can probably guarantee it's not Sanji, right? And to furthermore this, we can probably also elaborate on saying that it wasn't Sanji because Sanji was most likely with Luffy, right? And the reason for that is that when we're actually getting to Luffy and Zoro, we actually find out that Luffy himself was actually in the middle of actually feeding on a rabbit, right? A roasted rabbit, okay? And I imagine Sanji was with him as well, or Sanji actually managed to find Luffy. And this is probably most likely due to the fact of the roasted rabbit, okay? Now, keep in mind, Luffy does not know how to cook, right? He doesn't know how to cook, right? So I can probably guarantee that even if Luffy found a rabbit and basically used his like his fire fist kind of thing that he can do and everything. I'm forgetting the name of the attack, right? I think it's like it's not Red Rock. Well, actually, it might be Red Rock, right? Yeah, I think it's the Red Rock one. I feel like I'm forgetting which one of his fire fist attacks that he does in honor of his brother Ace. Okay. But to basically put out here and stuff like that, Luffy doesn't know how to necessarily cook, right? So I highly doubt he would actually know how long to actually roast the rabbit correctly, to the point where it doesn't actually get burned upon eating, right? Where it doesn't get burned too much to where you can't physically eat it anymore, right? So I imagine Sanji was actually there the entire time, okay? Then we also know for a fact that Zoro after hearing the commotion of the situation with the rabbit, ended up following it, and that's where he actually landed and basically met up with Luffy, right? So, the real question is, who was that? Then I guess the last person we have to look at is Chopper. But Chopper was on the outside of the glass dome, right? And he was in the middle of crying and literally asking for help, right? Literally crying and asking for help. So, if it wasn't any of the Straw Hats, then who was it? Could it have been the one who captured them? Could it have been Road, right? Road didn't know their name. However, his speech pattern is probably the most unusual, right? Because he's literally listed or basically described as being like an otaku, right? Or basically a huge fan, right? He's literally giving the insight of, being memorized by Luffy, Nami, and all them, right? Especially Nami, right? He basically sees her as being a queenly goddess, right? Like, he literally sees her as, like, a trophy to protect, right? Like, very fragile kind of thing, okay? So, in reality, it's definitely not Road, okay? So, whose voice was that? Some people basically point out and mention very carefully that the voice itself is almost very similar to how Luffy would normally talk, okay? But as I mentioned before, the voice obviously can't be Luffy's, okay? Because that really wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, you're having Luffy in one scenario right here, but then you're also having Nami, trying to wake up Nami in another scenario right here, right? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Another factor to consider here is this, right? Now, for the sake of it, some people basically point out and argued and basically listed out something that, well, technically speaking, Nami was heavily sedated and stuff like that, especially due to the fact that she was heavily drunk due to the hallucination of the Green Fairy. And fair enough, right? That is something to consider, right? So let's think of it this way, right? If Oda himself, right, really wanted to go to the whole trouble of having, say, like the voice, right? Let's just say the voice was Luffy, right? If he really wanted to go to the whole trouble of having Nami hallucinate and having Luffy hear Luffy's voice and waking her up, right? Then why not just draw a simple panel or draw a simple scenario here where Nami is basically hallucinating or something, right? Like, you can literally have Nami basically hallucinating that she's basically in a treasure room and stuff like that, like the biggest treasure room of her entire lifetime, and all of a sudden Luffy just comes out of nowhere in some kind of like dream-like bubble sequence and is just saying, "Wake up, Nami! Wake up, Nami!" Kind of like that, just basically saying, "Nami, wake up!" or "Wake up, Nami!" Kind of like that, okay? And then, boom, she just wakes up, alright? And she's literally got major hangover. Ugh. Oh. Why did I drink so much? Kind of like that, okay? But no, it's literally just basically darkness, okay? And in the darkness, all we hear is a voice, right? A rough, rude, basically a rough and rude voice, right? So, if the voice that Nami heard was not a Straw Hat, right? Even though it can be similar, it sounds similar to them, whose voice did she hear? And the real question is, who is speaking to Nami, right? Because this doesn't really feel like Nami is speaking to someone. This feels like someone is speaking to her, right? There are a few other possibilities, few scenarios, right? Could it be possible that Nami might have the voice of all things? I have no problems with it, but at the same time, that probably wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? Because when the whole situation that happened in Zou and everything, when Luffy and the only two people in Zou who were able to hear Zunisha was Luffy and Momo, right? However, it is important to understand here that only Momo can actually give command, and we're at the point where Zunisha can actually follow, right? Even though Luffy can hear Zunisha's voice, Zunisha cannot follow Luffy's command whatsoever, right? He can't do it, okay? So it doesn't matter what Luffy says, Zunisha will never respond, right? He can only respond and speak to Momo, okay? So the point here is that, well, during Zou and Wano, when the whole voice of all things was happening, Nami herself never, ever, ever experienced it, alright? Because she was never screaming in pain, right? Remember, both Momo and Luffy, upon hearing Zunisha's voice, were literally screaming, right? As in, the voice was extremely loud to them, okay? Like, literally loud, okay? So, that's something. But, is there other things to look at, okay? Is there other scenarios we can think of? There might, alright? Let's actually think about something, okay? What if it's possible here that Nami herself, right? What if it's something tied into, say, like Nami's bloodline, right? Nami's bloodline itself is a very mysterious thing, okay? And I made a lot of videos on Nami's bloodline, right? I made so many videos on it, okay? The last video I did was going over the fact that maybe Nami might be the child of Summers himself, right? And if you're interested, you can go check out that video, okay? Some other ones to throw in is obviously the Cloud D Rain video I did, and a few others, right? one of the very first videos I ever did on Nami's bloodline and everything, or the father of Nami, could be Shiki, okay? And I'm not here to really discuss the whole origins and everything, all that, okay? But there is something I do want to go over here, right? There is something I want to add a bit of a context, okay? So, what if it's possible that Nami herself could be a D? Specifically, a part of the Davy clan, okay? What if Nami herself is the child of a Davy D member, right? Now, going over it, right? If Oda obviously wants Summers to be Nami's father, then most likely we have to basically consider that the Luffy's mother's side, I'm sorry, not Luffy's mother's side, sorry, Nami's mother's side would have to be the D side, the Davy clan side, okay? Now, when I did my whole Luffy's mother video and everything, I did give a bit of an idea for Nami's mother as well and everything, and I used the moon as a concept and everything. That was more of just a crazy solution, a crazy idea to throw in, okay? I'm not necessarily saying that I wouldn't want it to happen if it did. I'm just saying that was a bit of an extra topic or a bit of an extra fun to sort of add in, okay? Here's one idea I can sort of relate on who exactly Nami's mother could be, okay? And I've actually talked about this before. I made a video on this as well, right? So if you're interested, you can go check that out, okay? What if it's possible that Nami's mother might be inspired by Mother Carey, alright? If you're not familiar who Mother Carey is actually sort of a character who's very similar to Davy Jones, right? She's actually sort of described as being the wife of Davy Jones in a lot of myth and folklore, right? Mother Carey is basically a supernatural entity figure, or who harbingers, who basically personifies the seas and, personifies the cruel and threatens the seas, and basically is the harbinger of storms, okay? What if it could be possible that Nami's mother is actually Mother Carey, or basically inspired by Mother Carey, right? What if by chance she is Davy D. Carey, right? Oda could literally take that concept here and probably make her say like maybe the cousin of Rocks, right? Or maybe even like the sister of Rocks, okay? Who knows, okay? Don't really know, but I suppose the possibility is there, right? Now, in all fairness, that doesn't really give the context of like, well, wait a minute, even if she's part of the Davy clan, what reason does that have to do with the whole boys thing, right? And yes, on the surface of it, you're right. It doesn't have anything to really do with it, okay? But in reality is, we still don't actually know the secrets to the Davy clan, okay? We still don't know that for certain, right? Now, going over it, we probably need to look at Blackbeard, right? Let's think of Blackbeard for a second, okay? So, when Luffy, Nami, and Zoro first meet Blackbeard, right? When they first meet him, right? Upon meeting them, and as they were leaving, Nami basically sort of says, like, hey, maybe we should ask him if he knows about Sky Island, right? And Luffy basically corrects Nami by saying it's not him, it's them, alright? Well, technically, it's Zoro who actually says them and everything, but I'm sure you get the point, right? Then Nami basically asks, them? Wait, was someone else with him? So, really, you're left with that, right? And you're really wondering, what exactly does that mean? And this has spawned numerous theories throughout time that Blackbeard himself, or Blackbeard's clan, the Davy clan, might have multiple souls in them, right? And if that's the case, and if by chance these souls could actually speak to one another, then that might actually be a good idea to look into Nami as well. That Nami herself could also be a member of the Davy clan, alright? But, in reality, how come none of this was ever pointed out before, right? Why is it that Nami has never experienced this, right? How come this has never really shown any affection, right? How come this has never really shown, right? Could it be the fact that Nami was too weak during that time, right? And that over time, your body and everything has to be stronger, right? Like, you literally have to be physically stronger in order to actually achieve or basically unlock this ability, right? And if this is like a unique ability that the Davy clan has, to where they can unlock multiple souls in their body, right? I suppose that's possible, but still, it's still a bit of an iffy, wada, alright? And look, in all fairness, I don't really have any problems with it, alright? If Oda wants Nami to be a part of the Davy clan, I can be okay with it, alright? I did make it a solution that originally I was thinking of the idea that Nami could have easily been, like, say, like the great-granddaughter or granddaughter to Clover himself. And then I sort of changed the topic to Luffy's mother instead, because I do think it could fit a lot better, explain the whole situation, you know, giving a more credible reason on, you know, his connection with Dragon and all that kind of stuff, right? Probably be a little bit more interesting in that vibe, okay? Then, another scenario to look at is the Buccaneers, right? Because there is also the situation here that the Buccaneers might also be kind of similar, right? Because the Buccaneers, or in terms of it, Vegapunk did mention that upon the idea that Kuma himself, right, was still able to function even after the situation of his humanity was supposed to be taken from him, he was still able to basically deny orders and still go through the whole trouble of trying to protect Bonnie, alright? So, could it be possible that this idea of more souls is more bigger than we think? And if that's the case, what exactly is it? And does Nami have this? Does Nami actually have more souls in her? If that's the case, could Nami herself eat more Delver, right? Could Nami also eat 2 Delvers, right? I don't know. I don't know. I suppose it's possible. But really, that would probably destroy the fun of it and everything, because, you know, with the whole concept of Blackbeard himself, right? Blackbeard having, literally Blackbeard himself being the only one to have more Delph makes him more the interesting and, like, really bad guy of the arc to really make it more seem like a big of a bit threat and everything. So, I don't really think that's going to be the case, okay? But, you know what? I'm not going to necessarily refuse and basically say it's not going to be possible, because, technically speaking, there is probably enough to really warrant a very good explanation to basically state why that could be the case, okay? Alright. Look, overall, I don't really know, alright? I don't actually know who it was. There were a few possibilities, okay? As I said, Nami herself obviously could have been hallucinating things like that, and it could be easily Luffy's voice that she wanted to hear, okay? That is very possible. But, let's go over something here, okay? So, a bit of a spoiler warning, alright? So, this will be the last thing I'm going to talk about, okay? This will be the very last thing I'm going to discuss here, okay? Before I officially discuss it, right? If you don't want to actually go over what I'm going to discuss here, because I'm going to go over something that happened in the last chapter, or the most previous chapter itself, alright? So if you're not interested in anything that's currently happening on God Valley, especially with the fight with Rox, Garp, and Roger and all that, I would advise you to basically just click off the video now, right? So if you, but still, alright, if you are interested and you don't care, then feel free to stick around, okay? But if you are done everything, you don't want to hear what I'm going to basically discuss, you are welcome to stop right here, right? So feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit notification bells, and feel free to leave a comment down below on what you actually think is the voice that Nami heard, right? And what exactly are your ideas of it as well, right? Could it be the voice of all things? Could it exactly be something else that we just probably don't really understand, right? Or could it just be simply nothing, right? Feel free to let me know, right? Okay. So now that we got that out of the way, let's actually think about something here, okay? So here's the thing, all right? When Rox himself is being demonized, right? As Rox is basically transforming into a demon and everything, oddly enough, he seems to still be able to speak, right? Because there is a crazy scenario here where Roger and Garp are actually hearing Rox's voice, okay? And it doesn't seem like he's actually speaking to them in terms of, like, what I'm doing. It's more like he's speaking, but, like, they're hearing his voice without him actually speaking, right? Almost like he's talking to the mind. Kind of like how Zunisha was doing with Momo and Luffy, right? Well, specifically more with Momo, okay? Almost like Rox was doing the exact same thing. So, wait a minute. Does that mean that the voice that Nami was hearing was Rox? But that doesn't make any sense, because Rox should be dead. But what if he's not dead? So wait. If Rox is not dead, then who is he? Is he the man marked by flames? Did he survive? No, I don't really know, alright? In all fairness here, I have no real ideas, okay? No real ideas. There are plenty of options and theories that we can look at, okay? As I mentioned, you obviously have the voice of all things, okay? There's that. You can also the fact to say, like, well, maybe it's something to do with Nami's bloodline, right? Nami's ancestors, right? Is she part of the Davy clan? Is she part of the Buccaneers, right? Probably not. Well, in fairness and everything, if I had to choose between the Davy clan or Buccaneers, I'd probably go more with the Davy clan, okay? But still. And then you literally could just say that it's just a complete nonsense, right? Like, it was literally just something that Oda did for that that panel itself, and it's really not going to be anything important down the line. And yes, in all fairness, you're probably right about that, okay? I'm not going to necessarily disagree with the fact to say that, yes, that's definitely going to be a possible thing. So, look, that will basically do it for this video itself, right? Thank you so much for joining me for another One Piece topic video, right? My name is 4D Clif, right? And as I mentioned, if you liked the video, please let me know in the comment section below, right? If you enjoy my channel, you want to see more of it, feel free to subscribe, right? I really do want to try and build up my subscribers as much as possible, right? And I appreciate every moment and every time that someone does subscribe to my channel, okay? Thank you so much, and you all have a great day. Goodbye, everybody.